Hello respected viewers, this is Pembroke Lodge in Richmond Park, London. So there was a mole catcher's cottage here initially in 1754, as in he had to catch moles here in this lovely royal park. And then George III was good friends with the Countess of Pembroke and Montgomery, and he gave it to her in 1787, if memory serves. But there's no suggestion that she was his mistress, because he was notoriously faithful to his good wife, Charlotte. But she had it rebuilt into something like the house we see today. So Sir John Soane designed a lot of it. And what else is inhabited by various other people. The Earl of Errol, he owned it for a while, and it was his descendant who was notoriously murdered in Kenya at about 1941. You can see the film of White Mischief about him, hereditary standard bearer of Scotland. And then I just think who else lived here. Well, most famously, Lord John Russell, the Liberal Prime Minister, he lived here. And he'd been around at the time of the Napoleonic Wars, felt the United Kingdom should have made peace with France, and that Napoleon shouldn't be demonized so much. He's a dictator. Most kings were dictators on the continent, and it really wasn't worth fighting to the finish, especially when the UK could lose. So, and then his own son died young. So Lord John Russell's grandson was Bertrand Russell. So Bertrand Russell, he grew up here, brought up by his grandparents. Between the age of 4 and the age of 22, he was educated by private tutors, and he went to Trinity College, Cambridge, renowned as a mathematician and philosopher, and he was a radical on every conceivable question, believing in gender equality, racial equality, the decriminalization of homosexuality, decolonization, socialism, pacifism, and was lost his fellowship of his Cambridge College over his anti-war activism in the First World War. Whilst not a communist, he had sympathies in that direction, and he met Vladimir Ilyich Lenin in Moscow in about 1921, and they conversed in English, because he thought the conversation would be in German, the only language that Lenin spoke fluently, but he spoke passable English from his time in London. But so Bertrand Russell, he was part of the campaign for nuclear disarmament and so on, the League Against Imperialism, and he was campaigning for the CND right till his death in 1970 at the age of 98. So he was also an outspoken atheist, being brought up an Anglican like most upper-class Britons, but then developed disdain for organised religion. So here's Pembroke Lodge, and in the Second World War, the Phantom Regiment was here, or Liaison Regiment, and it was really about coordinating communications between various units, particularly in Normandy. David Niven was here, later a very well-known Hollywood actor who'd been in the British Army in the 1930s, served in Malta. His own father had been killed early in the Second World War when David Niven was an infant. But David Niven, he left the army in the 30s, moved to Hollywood, but then he gave up his glittering career to sign up for the colours again of the Second World War, very gallantly. But yeah, had a distinguished cinematic career after the Second World War, died in the 1980s, but he said it was very convivial here. There's an officer's mess. Then it was a tea shop after the Second World War, and it was renovated 20 years ago, and now it's a conference venue and it's a wedding venue. You can hire it out. So here we are. It's only 2 stories, because of course this is before lifts, and so you don't want to have to walk up too many flights of stairs, particularly elderly people, pregnant women, and women had about 10 children each back then, disabled people, carrying babies and all the rest of it. Okay, so here we are. And a lovely view over Richmond Park. You can't quite see the river, it's obscured by the trees. So you can actually have full meals here, as well as just tea and scones and such like. So that is Pembroke Lodge. So it takes its name because the Countess of Pembroke owned it for a while. Countess being as in the wife of an earl. So I don't know if it was always painted white. And it's got an extensive art collection inside. So not a number of rooms you can hire out upstairs. But when Lord John Russell was here in the 19th century, Queen Victoria visited him. She actually lent it to him during his prime ministership, and he was in 10 Downing Street sometimes, but you know, some of the greats stink and central London was filthy. He preferred to meet people here, and crowned heads called upon him here, and the American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow Dickens visited him here, a number of other distinguished personages, William Makepeace Thackeray. So Bertrand Russell grew up in these very elevated circumstances, meeting the great and the good like that. And so he was very much a free thinker, and he'd met so many epoch-making politicians. But yeah, he rejected the establishment that he was born into. Someone of his prodigious talents could easily have been Prime Minister like his grandfather before him, had he chosen to pursue a more conventional path, but he wanted to plough his own furrow. So that Bertrand Russell, yeah, he married, but I'm not sure if he had children. And his name, Bertrand, as in from the French, Bertrand, because he had Huguenot ancestors in the 17th century, come from France, were persecuted for their Protestantism, hence he had that name. And Russell, so that's a distinguished family, English aristocratic family, distantly related to the Earl of Bedford, the Duke of Bedford, forgive me. And that's why there's Bedford Square in London as well as Russell Square. Right, so, and here is the portico, the front door going in. I've done a complete circuit of the exterior of the house. So look at these lovely deep leather armchairs. So you can get married here, you can see, okay? And there, queue up for your din-dins. So what else should I say? Anyone else? The Countess of Dunmore lived here. There's that famous contract law case called Countess of Dunmore. Yeah, the Ministry of Works had it. Anything else you should want to know about it? Yes, it's mostly Georgian architecture. So if I go in a minute. I don't know the fire ever actually burns. I'm not sure if it's open 12 months a year, but it's close to King Henry's Mound, which is a prehistoric burial mound commanding wonderful views over Richmond Park. You can see 10 miles away. You can see all the way to St Paul's Cathedral, legally protected. They're not allowed to build anything that would obstruct that view. So there were the Lord John Russell suite upstairs, the Bertrand Russell suite, the Phantom Room for the Phantom Regiment, the Belvedere. It's really Belvedere in Italian, like a beautiful sight. So one of it's closed for a private reception, something like that. Okay, so you're getting an idea of the dimensions of the place. Very, very busy. I was here about a month ago when the weather was somewhat cooler and not so many people were here. Okay, so that is Pembroke Lodge. I've been here once before. Very much recommended. An incredibly sunny day, and yeah, the flowers are in bloom. The daffodils already, though it's not April. Anyway, thank you for watching my video. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon, donate on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. All right, goodbye everybody from Pembroke Lodge, Richmond Park.